Grandmamma went up to Uncle. "Is that poor boy a little out of his mind?" she asked sympathizingly.
"Not in the least," Uncle assured her. "It is only that he was the wind that sent the chair rolling down the slope, and he is expecting his well-deserved punishment."
Grandmamma found this hard to believe, for in her opinion Peter did not look an entirely bad boy, nor could he have had any reason for destroying such an unnecessary thing as the chair. But Uncle had only given expression to the suspicion that he had had from the moment the accident happened. The angry looks which Peter had from the beginning cast at Clara, and the other signs of his dislike to what had been taking place on the mountain, had not escaped Uncle's eye. Putting two and two together, he had come to the right conclusion as to the cause of the disaster, and therefore he spoke without hesitation when he accused Peter. The lady broke out into lively expostulations on hearing this. "No, no, dear uncle, we will not punish the poor boy any further. One must be fair to him. Here are all these strangers from Frankfurt who come and carry away Heidi, his one sole possession, and a possession well worth having too, and he is left to sit alone day after day for weeks, with nothing to do but brood over his wrongs. No, no, let us be fair to him. His anger got the upper hand and drove him to an act of revenge, a foolish one, I own, but then we all behave foolishly when we are angry." And saying this, she went back to Peter, who still stood frightened and trembling. She sat down on the seat under the fir trees, and called him to her kindly. "Come here, boy, and stand in front of me, for I have something to say to you. Leave off shaking and trembling, for I want you to listen to me. You sent the chair rolling down the mountain so that it was broken to pieces. That was a very wrong thing to do, as you yourself knew very well at the time, and you also knew that you deserved to be punished for it. But be sure of this, Peter, that those who do wrong make a mistake when they think no one knows anything about it, for God sees and hears everything, and when the wicked doer tries to hide what he has done, then God wakes up the little watchman that he places inside us all when we are born, and who sleeps on quietly till we do something wrong. And the little watchman has a small goad in his hand, and when he wakes up, he keeps on pricking us with it, so that we have not a moment's peace. And the watchman torments us still further, for he keeps on calling out, 'Now you will be found out! Now they will drag you off to punishment!' And so we pass our life in fear and trouble, and never know a moment's happiness or peace. Have you not felt something like that lately, Peter?" Peter gave a contrite nod of the head, as one who knew all about it, for Grandmamma had described his own feelings exactly. "And you calculated wrongly also in another way," continued Grandmamma, "for you see, the harm you intended has turned out for the best for those you wished to hurt. As Clara had no chair to go in, and yet wanted so much to see the flowers, she made the effort to walk, and every day since she has been walking better and better. Do not forget my words, and whenever you feel inclined to do anything wrong, think of the little watchman inside you with his goad and his disagreeable voice. Will you remember all this?" "Yes, I will," answered Peter, still very subdued, for he did not yet know how the matter was going to end, as the police constable was still standing with the uncle. "That's right. And now the thing is over and done for you," said Grandmamma. "But I should like you to have something for a pleasant reminder of the visits from Frankfurt. Can you tell me anything that you have wished very much to have? What would you like best as a present?" Peter lifted his head at this, and stared open-eyed at Grandmamma. Up to the last minute He had been expecting something dreadful to happen, and now he might have anything that he wanted. His mind seemed all of a whirl.
"I mean what I say," went on Grandmamma. "You shall choose what you would like to have as a remembrance from the Frankfurt visitors, and as a token that they will not think any more of the wrong thing you did. Now do you understand me, boy?"
The fact began at last to dawn upon Peter's mind that he had no further punishment to fear, and that the kind lady sitting in front of him had delivered him from the police constable. He suddenly felt as if the weight of a mountain had fallen off him. He had also by this time awakened to the further conviction that it was better to make a full confession at once of anything he had done wrong or had left undone, and so he said, "And I lost the paper too." Grandmamma had to consider a moment what he meant, but soon recalled his connection with her telegram, and answered kindly,
"You are a good boy to tell me. Never conceal anything you have done wrong, and then all will come right again. And now, what would you like me to give you?"
Peter grew almost giddy with the thought that he could have anything in the world that he wished for. He had a vision of the yearly fair at Mayenfield, with the glittering booths, and all the lovely things he had stood gazing at for hours, without a hope of ever possessing one of them, for Peter's purse never held more than 5 cents, and all these fascinating objects cost double that amount. There were the pretty little red whistles that he could use to call his goats, and the splendid knives with rounded handles, known as toad strikers, with which one could do such fine whittling. Peter remained pondering. He was trying to think which of these 2 desirable objects he should like to have, and he found it difficult to decide. Then a bright thought occurred to him. He would then be able to think over the matter between now and next year's fair.
"A dime," answered Peter, who was no longer in doubt. Grandmamma could not help laughing. "That is not an extravagant request. Come here, then." And she pulled out her purse and put 4 bright silver dollars in his hand, and then laid some dimes on top of them. "We will settle our accounts at once," she continued, "and I will explain them to you. I have given you as many dimes as there are weeks in the year, and so every Sunday throughout the year you can take out a dime to spend."
"As long as I live," said Peter quite innocently.
Grandmamma laughed more still at this, and the men, hearing her, paused in their talk to listen to what was going on. "Yes, boy, you shall have it all your life. I will put it down in my will. Do you hear, my son? And you are to put it down into yours as well. A dime a week to Peter as long as he lives." Mr. Sessemann nodded his assent and joined in the laughter. Peter looked again at the present in his hand to make sure he was not dreaming, and then said, "Thank God!" And he went off, running and leaping with more even than his usual agility, and this time managed to keep his feet, for it was not fear, but joy such as he had never known before in his life, that now sent him flying up the mountain. All trouble and trembling had disappeared, and he was had to have a dime every week for his life. Later, after dinner, when the party was sitting together chatting, Clara drew her father a little aside, and said with an eagerness that had been unknown to the little tired invalid, "Oh, papa, if you only knew all that grandfather has done for me from day to day! I cannot reckon his kindnesses, but I shall never forget them as long as I live. And I keep thinking what I could do for him, or what present I could make him that would give him half as much pleasure as he has given me. "That is just what I wish for myself, Clara," replied her father, whose face grew happier each time he looked at his little daughter. "I have also been thinking how we can best show our gratitude to our good benefactor."
Mr. Sessemann went over to Uncle, and taking him by the hand said,
"Dear friend, you will believe me when I tell you that I have known no real happiness for years past. What good were money and property to me when they were unable to make my poor child well and happy? With the help of God, you have made her whole and strong, and you have given new life not only to her but to me. Tell me now, in what way can I show my gratitude to you? I can never repay all you have done, but whatever it is in my power to do is at your service. Speak, friend, and tell me what I can do." Uncle had listened to him quietly, with a smile of pleasure on his face as he looked at the happy father. "Mr. Sessemann," he replied in his dignified way, "I too have my share in the joy of your daughter's recovery, and my trouble is well repaid by it. I thank you heartily for all you have said, but I have need of nothing. I have enough for myself and the child as long as I live. Of course, I am growing old, and shall not be here much longer. I have nothing to leave the child when I die. If you could promise me that Heidi will never have to earn her living among strangers, then you would richly reward me for all I have done for your child." "There could never be any question of such a thing as that, my dear friend," said Mr. Sessemann quickly. "I look upon the child as my own. Ask my mother, my daughter. You may be sure that they will never allow the child to be left in anyone else's care. But if it will make you happier, I give you here my hand upon it. I promise you Heidi shall never have to go and earn her living among strangers. I will make provision against this both during my life and after. But now I have something else to say. Independent of her circumstances, the child is totally unfitted to live a life away from home. We found that out when she was with us. But she has made friends, and among them I know one who is at this moment in Frankfurt. He is winding up his affairs there, that he may be free to go where he likes and take his rest. I am of course speaking of my friend the doctor, who came over here in the autumn, and who, having well considered your advice, intends to settle in this neighbourhood, for he has never felt so well and happy anywhere as in the company of you and Heidi. So you see, the child will henceforth have two protectors near her, and may they both live long to share the task." "God grant indeed it may be so," answered Grandmamma, shaking Uncle's hand warmly as she spoke, to show how sincerely she echoed her son's wish. Then putting her arm around Heidi, who was standing near, she drew the child to her. "And I have a question to ask you too, dear Heidi. Tell me if there is anything you particularly wish for."
"Yes, there is,"
answered Heidi promptly, looking up delightedly at Grandmamma. "Then tell me at once, dear. What is it?"
"I want to have the bed I slept in at Frankfurt, with the high pillows and thick coverlid, and then Grandmother will not have to lie with her head downhill and hardly able to breathe, and she will be warm enough under the coverlid, not having to wear her shawl in bed to prevent her freezing to death."
In her eagerness to obtain what she had set her heart upon, Heidi hardly gave herself time to get out all she had to say, and did not pause for breath till she reached the end of her sentence. "Dearest child," answered Grandmamma, moved by Heidi's speech, "what is this you tell me of grandmother? You are right to remind me. In the midst of our own happiness, we forget too often that which we ought to remember before all things. When God has shown us someone's special mercy, we should think of once those who are denied so many things. I will telegraph to Frankfurt at once. Miss Rottermeier shall pack up the bed this very day, and it will be here in 2 days' time. God willing, grandmother shall soon be sleeping comfortably upon it."
Heidi skipped round Grandmamma in her glee, and then, stopping all of a sudden, said quickly, "I must make haste down and tell her."
"No, no, Heidi! What can you be thinking of?" said her grandfather reprovingly. "You can't be running backwards and forwards like that when you have visitors." But Grandmamma interfered on Heidi's behalf. "The child is not so far wrong, uncle," she said, "and poor grandmother has too long been deprived of Heidi for our sakes. Let us all go down to her together. I believe my horse is waiting for me, and I can ride down from there, and as soon as I get to Dovely, the message shall be sent off. What do you think of my plan, son?" Mr. Sessemann had not yet had time to speak of his travelling plans, so he begged his mother to wait a few moments, that he might tell her what he proposed doing. Mr. Sessemann had been arranging that he and his mother should make a little tour in Switzerland, first ascertaining if Clara was in a fit state to go some part of the way with them. But now he would have the full enjoyment of his daughter's company, and that being so, he did not want to miss any of these beautiful days of later summer, but to start at once on the journey that he now looked forward to with such additional pleasure. And so he proposed that they should spend the night in Dörfli, and that next day he should come and get Clara. Then they would all three go down to Ragatz, and make that their starting point. Clara was rather upset at first of the thought of saying goodbye like this to the mountain. She could not help being pleased, however, at the prospect of another journey, and no time was allowed her to give way to lamentation. Grandmamma had already taken Heidi by the hand, preparatory to leading the way, when she suddenly turned. "But what is to become of Clara?" she asked, remembering all at once that the child could not yet take so long a walk. She gave a nod of satisfaction as she saw that Uncle had already taken Clara up in his arms and was following her with sturdy strides. Mr. Sessemann brought up the rear, and so they all started down the mountain. Heidi kept jumping for joy as she and Mrs. Sessemann walked along side by side, and Grandmamma asked all about Peter's grandmother, how she lived and what she did, especially in the winter when it was so cold. And Heidi gave her a minute account of everything, for she knew all that went on at grandmother's, and told her how the old woman sat crouching in her corner and trembling with cold. She was able also to give her exact particulars of what grandmother had and had not to eat. Grandmamma listened with interest and sympathy until they came to grandmother's. Brigitte was just hanging out Peter's second shirt in the sun, so that he might have it ready to put on when he had worn the other long enough. As soon as she saw the company approaching, she rushed indoors. "The whole party of them are just going past, mother. Evidently you're returning home again," she informed the old woman. "Uncle is with them, carrying the sick child." "Alas, is it really to be so then?" sighed the grandmother. "And you saw Heidi with them? Then they are taking her away. If only she could come and put her hand in mine again. If I could but hear her voice once more." At this moment the door flew open, and Heidi sprang across to the corner and threw her arms round grandmother. "Grandmother! Grandmother! My bed is to be sent from Frankfurt with all the 3 pillows and the thick coverlid. Grandmamma says it will be here in 2 days. Heidi could not get her words out quickly enough, for she was impatient to see grandmother's great joy at the news. The latter smiled, but said a little sadly, "She must indeed be a good, kind lady, and I ought to be glad to think she is taking you with her." but I shall not outlive it long. What is this I hear? Who has been telling my good grandmother such tales? Exclaimed a kindly voice, and grandmother felt her hand taken and warmly pressed, for grandmamma had followed Heidi in and heard all that was said. No, no, there is no thought of such a thing. Heidi is going to stay with you and make you happy. We want to see her again, but we shall come to her. We hope to pay a visit to the Alm every year, for we have a good cause to offer up especial thanks to God upon this spot where so great a miracle has been wrought upon our child. Then grandmother's face was lighted up with genuine happiness, and she pressed Mrs. Sesseman's hand over and over again, unable to speak her thanks, while 2 large tears of joy rolled down her aged cheeks. And Heidi saw the glad change come over grandmother's face, and she too now was entirely happy. She clung to the old woman, saying, "Hasn't it all come about, grandmother? Just like the hymn I read to you last time? Isn't the bed from Frankfurt sent to make you well?" "Yes, Heidi, and many, many other good things too, which God has sent me," said the grandmother, deeply moved. "I did not think it possible that there were so many kind people ready to trouble themselves about a poor old woman and to do so much for her. Nothing strengthens our belief in a kind heavenly Father who never forgets even the least of his creatures so much as to know that there are such people full of goodness and pity for a poor, useless creature such as I am." "My good grandmother," said Mrs. Sessemann, interrupting her, "we are all equally poor and helpless in the eyes of God, and all have equal need that he should not forget us. But now we must say good-bye, but only until we meet again, for when we pay our next year's visit to the Alm, you will be the first person we shall come and see. Meanwhile, we shall not forget you." And Mrs. Sessemann took grandmother's hand again and shook it in farewell. But grandmother would not let her off even then without more words of gratitude, and without calling down on her benefactress and all belonging to her every blessing that God had to bestow. At last Mr. Sessemann and his mother were able to continue their journey downwards, while Uncle carried Clara back home, with Heidi beside him, so full of joy of what was coming for grandmother that every step was a jump. But there were many tears shed the following morning by the departing Clara, who wept to say good-bye to the beautiful mountain home, where she had been happier than ever before in her life. Heidi did her best to comfort her. "Summer will be here again in no time," she said, "and then you will come again, and it will be nicer still, for you will be able to walk about from the beginning. We can then go out every day with the goats up to where the flowers grow, and enjoy ourselves from the very moment you arrive." Mr. Sessemann had come as arranged to take his little daughter away, and was just now standing and talking with Uncle, for they had much to say to one another. Clara felt somewhat consoled by Heidi's words, and wiped away her tears. "Be sure you say good-bye for me to Peter and the goats, especially to Little Swan. I wish I could give Little Swan a present, for she has helped so much to make me strong." "Well, you can if you like," replied Heidi. "Send her a little gift. Send her a little salt. You know how she likes to lick some out of grandfather's hand when she comes home at night." Clara was delighted at this idea. "Oh, then I shall send 100 pounds of salt from Frankfurt, for I want her to have something as a remembrance of me." Mr. Sessemann now beckoned to the children, as it was time to be off. Grandmamma's white horse had been brought up for Clara, as she was no longer obliged to be carried in a chair. Heidi ran to the far edge of the slope, and continued to wave her hand to Clara until the last glimpse of horse and rider had disappeared. And now the bed has arrived, and grandmother is sleeping so soundly all night that she is sure to grow stronger. Grandmamma Sessemann, moreover, has not forgotten how cold the winter is on the mountain. She has sent a large parcel of warm clothing of every description, so that the blind grandmother can wrap herself round and round, and will certainly not tremble with cold now, as she sits in her corner. There is a great deal of building going on at Durfley. The doctor has arrived, and, for the present, is occupying his old quarters. His friends have advised to buy the old house that Uncle and Heidi live in during the winter. The doctor is having this part of the old house rebuilt for himself, the other part being repaired for Uncle and Heidi, for the doctor is aware that Uncle is a man of independent spirit, who likes to have a house to himself. Quite at the back, a warm and well-walled stall is being put up for the 2 goats, and there they will pass their winter in comfort. The 2 men are becoming better friends every day, and as they walk about the new buildings to see how they are getting on, their thoughts continually turn to Heidi, for the chief pleasure to each in connection with the house is that they will have the light-hearted little girl with them there.
"Dear friend," said the doctor on one of these occasions as they were standing together, "you will see this matter in the same light as I do, I am sure. I share your happiness in the child as if next to you I was the one to whom she most closely belonged. But I wish also to share all responsibilities concerning her and to do my best for the child. I shall then feel I have my rights in her, and I shall look forward to her being with me and caring for me in my old age, which is the one great wish of my heart. She will have the same claims upon me as if she were my own child, and I shall provide for her as such. And so we shall be able to leave her without anxiety that when the day comes that you and I must go."
Uncle did not speak, but he clasped the doctor's hands in his, and his good friend could read in the old man's eyes how greatly moved he was, and how glad and grateful he felt. Heidi and Peter were at this moment sitting with grandmother, and the one had so much to relate and the others to listen to, that they all 3 got closer and closer to one another, hardly able to breathe in their eagerness not to miss a word. And how much there was to tell of all the events that had taken place that last summer, for they had not many opportunities of meeting since then. And it was difficult to say which of the 3 looked the happiest at being together again, and at the recollection of all the wonderful things that had happened. Mother Brigitte's face was perhaps the happiest of all, as now, with the help of Heidi's explanation, she was able to understand for the first time the history of Peter's weekly dime for life. Then at last the grandmother spoke. "Heidi, read me one of the hymns. I feel I can do nothing for the remainder of my life, but thank the Father in heaven for all the mercies he has shown us." And there you have it, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. That was the story of Heidi by Johanna Spyri. I hope you have enjoyed discovering it as much as I have enjoyed rediscovering it. Please join us next time for a new chapter book, which is Doctor Dolittle, and it's going to be read by channel founder Alice J. Crouch. I look forward to it then. In the meantime, my name's been Sascha Cooper, and this has been Quarantine Kids Storytime. Take care, everybody, and as always, stay safe out there. Bye-bye!